Good morning, seventh grade. This is the audio version of our story for the day, Rikki-Tikki-tavi. All right, so here we go. So Rikki-Tikki-tavi is a mongoose, which is like a ferret, like it's a small little creature there. All right, so Rudyard Kipling wrote this story. He also wrote the Jungle Book. Not bad. So this story starts off with a narrative, and the animals actually talk, which is an example of personification. In case you didn't know that. So Rikki-Tikki-tavi by Rudyard Kipling starts. This is the story of the Great War that Rikki-Tikki-tavi fought single-handed through the bathrooms of the big bungalow. Now, it takes place on a bungalow is like a small little hut, and it takes place on a military base because Britain had set up little bases throughout India because India at the time was under Britain's control. Now, Darcy, the tailor bird, helped him, and Chucandra, the muskrat, who never comes out in the middle of the floor, but always creeps around by the wall and gave him advice. But Rikki-Tikki honestly did the real fighting in this battle, this war. He was a mongoose, rather like a little cat in his fur and his tail, but quite like a weasel in his head and his habits. His eyes and the end of the restless nose were all pink. He could scratch himself anywhere he pleased. Yes. And his leg, front or back, and that he chose to use. He could fluff up his tail till it looked like a bottle brush. And his war cry, as he scuttled through the long grass, was Rikki-Tikki-Tikki-Tikki. Now, one day, a high summer flood washed him out of the burrow where he lived. A burrow is like a little tunnel, little hole, like a rabbit hole kind of thing. Yeah. Now, lived with his father and mother, carried him kicking and clucking down a roadside ditch. This mongoose, he found a little wisp of grass floating there and clung to it till he lost his senses because this flood came down and just washed his entire home and all his family all away. And there was a piece of grass and he held on to it and he wouldn't let go. When he revived, he was lying in the hot sun in the middle of the garden path, very draggled indeed, and a small boy was saying, "Here's a dead mongoose. Let's have a funeral," because that makes sense. "No," said his mother, "let's take him and dry him. Perhaps he really isn't dead," because playing with a possibly dead animal makes sense. They took him into the house, and a big man picked him up between his fingers and thumb and said he was not dead, but half choked. He felt for a pulse. So they wrapped him in cotton and wool and warmed him over a little fire, and he opened his eyes and sneezed. Shoo! "Now," said the big man, he was an enlightened man, an Englishman, and he was enlightened too, who had just moved into a bungalow. "Don't frighten him, and we'll see what he'll do." It is the harshest thing in the world to frighten a mongoose, because he is eaten up from the nose to the tail with curiosity. He's just very curious. The motto of all mongoose family is to run and find out. And Rikki-Tikki-Tikki was a true mongoose. He looked at the cotton wool, decided that it was not good to eat. He ran around the table, sat up and put his fur in order, scratched himself and jumped on the small boy's shoulder. "Don't be frightened, Teddy," said his father. "This is his way of making friends." "Ouch! He's tickling my chin," said the Teddy. Rikki-Tikki looked down between the boy's collar and neck, snuffed at his ear, and climbed down to the floor, where he sat rubbing his nose. "Good gracious," said Teddy's mother, "and that's a wild creature. I suppose he's so tame because we've been kind to him?" "All mongooses are like that," said her husband. "If Teddy doesn't pick him up by the tail or try to put him in a cage, he'll run in and out of the house all day long. Let's give him something to eat. Because, of course, let's take care of this wild animal who we know nothing about." They gave him a little piece of raw meat. Rikki-Tikki liked it immensely, and when it was finished, he went out into the veranda, that's the outside area, and sat in the sunshine and fluffed his fur to make it dry to the roots. Then he felt better. "There are more things to find out about in this house," he said to himself, "than all my family could find out in all of their lives. I shall certainly stay and find out." He spent all day roaming over the house. He nearly drowned himself in the bathtub and burnt it on the end of the big man's cigar, for he climbed up to the big man's lap to see how writing was done. At nightfall, see, here's what happens at nightfall. At nightfall, he ran into Teddy's nursery to watch how the kerosene lamps were lighted. And when Teddy went to bed, Rikki-Tikki climbed up too. But he was restless companion because he had to get up and attend to every single noise all through the night and find out what made it. Teddy's mother and his father came in, and the last thing to look at their boy, excuse me, and Rikki-Tikki was awake on the pillow. "I don't like that," said Teddy's mother. "He may bite the child." "Well, we should have thought about that when we found the mongoose and decided to bring it into the house." "He'll do no such thing," said the father. "Teddy is safer with this little beast than a bloodhound to watch him. If a snake came into the nursery now..." But Teddy's mother wouldn't think of such an awful thing. Mongooses and snakes are mortal enemies. They always are. Early in the morning, Rikki-Tikki came to early breakfast to the veranda. Remember, that's the outside area. Kind of like a open back porch. Riding on Teddy's shoulder, and gave him a banana and some boiled egg, and he sat on all their laps, one after the other, because every well-brought-up mongoose always hopes to be a house mongoose someday and have rooms to run about in. And Rikki-Tikki's mother, she used to live in the general's house. Remember, we're on a military base with like little bungalows all around. He came across, had carefully told Rikki what to do if he ever came across a white man. Then Rikki-Tikki went out into the garden to see what was to be eaten. It was a large garden and only half cultivated, with bushes as big as summer houses, as Marshall kneeled rose, lime, and orange trees, clumps of bamboos, and thickets of high grass. Rikki-Tikki licked his lips. "This is a splendid hunting ground," he said, and his tail grew bottle-brushy at the thought of it, and he scuttled up and down the garden, snuffing here and there till he heard very sorrowful voices in a thorn bush. "Somebody's crying." They had made Darcy. It was Darcy the tailor bird and his wife. Now, Darcy is a male. His wife, obviously, female. This is important because Darcy has a girl-sounding name, and it is a boy in our story because it can get confusing. They had made a beautiful nest by pulling two big leaves together and stitching them up the edges with fibers, and had filled the hollow with cotton and downy fluff. So they made a nest is basically what is going on. The nest swayed to and fro as they sat on the rim, and they cried. "Why are these birds crying?" "What is the matter?" asked Rikki-Tikki. "We are very miserable," said Darcy. "One of our babies fell out of the nest yesterday, and Nog ate it." Said Rikki-Tikki-tavi. "That is very sad, but I am a stranger here. Who is Nog?" Darcy and his wife only cowered down in the nest without answering. From the thick grass at the foot of the bush, there came a low hiss, a horrid cold sound that made Rikki-Tikki jump back 2 clear feet. Then, inch by inch, out of the grass rose up the head of a snake. It was specifically a cobra. Rikki-Tikki jumped back 2 clear feet. Then, inch by inch, out of the grass rose up the head of the spread hood of the Nog. The hood is the part of the... Wait, there we go. The back part of the snake. You know how it's like flat like that? Yeah. Okay, so anyway. So Nog, the big black cobra, and he was 5 feet long from tongue to tail. When he had lifted 1/3 of himself clear of the ground, he stayed balancing to and fro exactly as a dandelion. So like this. Tough balance of the wind, and he looked at Rikki-Tikki with the wicked snake eyes that never changed their expression, whatever the snake may be thinking of. "Who is Nog?" said he. "I am Nog, the great god of Brahm." In Indian mythology, the snake is one of the parts that plays in the mythology of India. "Put his mark upon all the people." So Brahm is another name for the creator of the universe in Hindu religion. So the great god Brahm put his mark upon all other people, and when the first cobra spread his hood to keep the sun off Brahm as he slept, "Look and be afraid." He spread out his hood more than ever, and Rikki-Tikki saw the spectacle mark on the back of it that looked exactly like the eye part of the hood, and the eye fascinating. So basically, here's the snake, there's the hood, and on the hood there was like a marking. It looked like an eye. He was afraid for the minute, but it was impossible for a mongoose to stay frightened for any length of time, and Though Rikki-Tikki had never met a live cobra before, his mother had fed him on dead ones. Yummy! And he knew that all of a grown mongoose's business in life was to fight and eat snakes. That's all they did, fight and eat snakes. Nog knew that too, and at the bottom of his cold heart, he was actually afraid of this giant cobra. Well, said Rikki-Tikki, as his tail began to fluff up again, marks or no marks, do you think it is right for you to eat a fledgling? A baby bird. Vocabulary word. Out of the nest? Nog was thinking to himself and watching the least little movement in the grass behind Rikki-Tikki. He knew that mongooses in the garden meant death sooner or later for him and his family, but he wanted to get Rikki-Tikki off guard, so he dropped his head a little and put it on one side. Let us talk, he said. You eat eggs. Why should I not eat birds? Sss. Behind you! Behind you! Look behind you, said Darcy. Rikki-Tikki knew better than to waste time staring. He jumped up in the air as high as he could go, and just under him whizzed by the head of Najina, Nog's wicked wife. It was a trick. So while Nog was talking to Rikki-Tikki, all of a sudden, Nog's wife snuck up behind him and attack. But Rikki-Tikki jumped up. Ah! She had crept up behind him as he was talking to make an end of him. And he heard her savage hiss as the stroke missed him. He came down almost on her back, as if he had been an old mongoose. He would have known that then was the time to break her back with one bite, but he was afraid of the terrible lashing return stroke of the cobra. He bit indeed, but did not bite long enough, and then he jumped clear of the whisking tail, leaving Najina torn and angry. Wicked, wicked Darcy! You know, the bird had said, look out, said Nog, lashing up as high as he could reach towards the nest in the thorn bush, but Darcy had built it out of reach of the snakes, and it had only swayed to and fro. Rikki-Tikki felt his eyes glowing red, because a mongoose's eyes turn red when they're mad, and hot when mongoose's eyes grow red and angry, as he sat back on his tail and hind legs like a little kangaroo and looked all around him and chatted with rage. But Nog and Najina had disappeared into the grass, and when a snake missed its stroke, it never says anything or gives any sign of what it means to do next. Rikki-Tikki did not care to follow them, for he did not feel sure that he could manage 2 snakes at once. That's a pretty big battle. So he trotted off to the gravel path near the house and sat down to think. It was a serious matter. If you read the old books of natural history, you will find that they say when the mongoose fights the snake and happens to get bitten, he runs off and eats some herbs that cures him. That is not true. The victory is only a matter of quickness of eye and quickness of foot. Snake's blows against the mongoose's jump, and as no eye can follow the motion of a snake's head when it strikes, this makes things much more wonderful than any magical herb. Rikki-Tikki knew he was a young mongoose, and it made him all the more pleased to think that he had managed to escape a blow from behind. Basically, the snake bites you, you're dead. There's no herb, there's no nothing. You got nothing. Nothing. You're dead. It gave him confidence in himself, and when Teddy came running down the path, Rikki-Tikki was ready to be petted. But just as Teddy was stopping, something wriggled a little in the dust, and a tiny voice said, "Be careful. I am death." It was Karate, the dusty brown snakeling. Another snake? And his bite is as dangerous as a cobra. But he is so small that nobody thinks of him because he blends in with the dirt. He's dirt colored and he looks like dirt and he hides in the dirt. Can't see him. And so he does more harm to people. The end of part 1. Part 2 coming up soon to a video near you.